Hi, Allison. Thanks for joining today.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you're also a fellow podcaster. You're a coach, speaker. You work with individuals, teams, and I absolutely love it. And where I would like to start is there's a saying that you tend to use, I've seen in a lot of your writing here, is see through the wood for the trees. So, I'd love to kind of just springboard from that and get your take. I mean, I understand the idiom, how it generally means, but I'd love to kind of get your take. And then we'll kind of dive
Yeah.
in. I want to hear more about your story and how you work with people.
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is see the wood for the trees is quite UK centric. So actually, once you start traveling around the globe, people might be more familiar with can't see the forest for the trees, or even can't see
Yes,
the
that's
woods for the trees. So I've learnt
yes.
to add that in. Although interestingly, I would say there's a huge difference between can't see the wood or the forest for the trees because a wood, certainly here in the UK, is quite small, and therefore you would be able to see the wood, whereas forests are far too big, and so therefore you can't see them. So you could argue, if you are using the phrase, I can't see the forest for the trees, or even can't see the wood for the trees, but are imagining the wood is the size of a forest, is don't try. You're trying to do the impossible. And I think that's the springboardy bit for me that yes, I use metaphor in my coaching because I think sometimes diving into the story and the drama of the situation isn't helpful. But it's because we use this language all the time. And sometimes we're not precise enough with our language. So we will use phrases like, can't see the wood for the trees, I'm stuck in a rut, I'm up a creek without a paddle, going round in circles. And we use those words really to say I'm stuck and there is no solution. I'm going round in circles, full stop. I can't see the wood for the trees, full stop. And what I realized is if you use the metaphor contained in those very words, you will find a solution. So if somebody says to me, so you have to be very careful what you say to me. But if somebody says to me, I can't see the wood for the trees, I'll quite often will be outside anyway. But if not, I'll encourage them to find a wood and we'll walk around a wood. So I've had senior managers walking around, each picked a different saying that resonates with their current predicament, and then just explore nature for the solution. Because and I always describe it as we send our story on a coffee break. It's like, you know what? We're giving our logical brain and the story and the problem a break. So we're saying, go on a coffee break, you stay over there. We're going to explore it metaphorically. So we're going to look at patterns. Today, I was out for a walk with somebody. She didn't know what I did. And in 5 minutes, she just looked at me. She said, oh, yeah, yeah, I've got this problem. And in 5 minutes, nature had given her a solution because she'd been able to explore the situation without telling me what it was about, but be able to for the path to mean something and the drudgery of the path to mean
Yeah.
something, etc. So I and I feel minded to say that there's a brilliant phrase people use when they're overwhelmed, which is, "Oh, I'm juggling. I feel like I'm juggling balls." Now, invariably, when somebody says that, what they mean is, I have got 100 balls and I'm trying to juggle them,
Mhm.
and that's impossible. But because we're not specific enough in our language, it's as if we think we should be able to do it. So we beat ourselves up. We go, oh, I've got loads of work. I'm not coping with it. I'm overwhelmed. I
Yeah.
should be able to juggle this many balls. Whereas as soon as you go, so how many balls can most people juggle? Most people might say two. But anyway, let's assume you might be able to, you're an expert juggler and you can do three or four. I know, if you went to the circus, we'd have a lot more. So it's like, well, that's fine. So if you've got more balls than three or four that you're juggling, then what can we do with the other balls? And so it then becomes a conversation about, oh, I need to put them in a bag. I need to put Velcro on them. There was a YouTube video I did with lots of Velcro balls on hats and whatever. So for me, it's the precision of our language and noticing the metaphor within our language and going, so how is that going to give me insight about the situation I'm struggling with?
I love that. And it was funny too because you were saying that, and I was thinking about, just different sayings, and I know I've caught myself saying, I can't gain field awareness. Like, it's just I feel like I'm in the fog and I can't
Okay.
pull myself back well enough to see what's going on in the big picture. But I do like and I like the way you articulated a couple of things too. One was with the nature, and then the other is kind of with the ball metaphor, or is because you can, and maybe you didn't do this or did do this, and you can let me know. It was, um, I've experienced something like that where you kind of name them and then you put them in those
Nice.
compartmentalizations. So you just like, I know
Okay.
I can come back to them, and it's kind of like putting it on ice.
Yes.
Release it and coming
Yeah.
back. And then, and the other thing too is I was when you were saying that and working with people, I don't know if this is lost or not, but I was almost getting the sense of there's a way that we can articulate with the language if we externalize it
Yeah.
first and then bring it back to
Yeah.
ourselves.
Nice.
Like there's a bifurcation in the road, or there's a fork in the road, and I feel like I don't know which path
Oh,
to
well,
take. You know,
we could be there. If anybody listening has got a decision to make, then I'd say put it to one side and go for a walk in a park that's got lots of crossroads. So here in the UK, we've not got huge parks, so it's great because you can go for a walk and come across lots of different crossroads. And so I would say go and observe how you make decisions on that walk,
Mhm,
because you'll get such insight about, oh, I'm going for the easy route. Oh, I'm paying no attention to where I want to go, or I'm paying real attention to where I want to go, or oh, well, that didn't look very nice, so I went this way. And so what happens is, especially if you go with the intention of, I'm going on this walk with this situation in mind, because sometimes you'll do different things than you might do ordinarily, because your body is going, okay, I'm going to enable, as you've just said, I'm going to bring it out in front of you for you to see the pattern you're playing. So you're at a crossroads, but actually what's happening is every crossroads you come to, you go for the easy route. And yet you
mhm,
absolutely know quite often that the way to get to the destination is that difficult route. But it's like, "No, no, no, I don't wanna do difficult, I wanna do easy." Well, is it any wonder we end up off track? Is one pattern you might see. So, I mean, it amazes me how we can do that, that we can go for a walk and take all of the patterns to do with the situation with us, and then see them at play in whether it's turning a corner. So if somebody wants to turn a corner, go and find a corner outside and turn it, and just notice what you notice. I
mhm.
mean, everybody's going, "What does she mean?" It's like, you're only gonna know when you do it. It's like, go and find a corner. If you've got a corner and you keep saying, "We need to turn the corner," then turn the corner and just notice what you notice before the corner, during the corner, when you get round the corner. Corners are really interesting because when we say, "Oh, I've got to turn a corner," it's new, it's something we don't go, we're fearful about what's around the corner, so we don't do it. It's like, we need to change, we need to bring change into this situation, but I'm not doing it, is quite often how we use the phrase. In reality, and this is where I get, there is one way of looking at metaphor, which is called clean language, where the coach would not make any assumptions about what that metaphor means. If you say you turn a corner, the corner is like any other corner in nature. So I
Mhm.
apply how it operates to the situation. If you think about any corner out in nature, how many of them has a cliff edge as soon as you turn the corner?
Yeah,
None. When we say, "Oh, I've turned a corner in my life," we're imagining there's a cliff edge.
yeah,
We're imagining we need to turn the corner, but I'm scared to turn it because I'm really fearful about what's around that corner, and I might fall off the cliff edge when I turn the corner. But in reality, that isn't ever.
yeah. Does that tie into a little bit of fear of success, or is that just a failure to launch? A little bit of
Yeah, I think it could be all sorts of things really. There are common themes. So if you can't see the wood for the trees, for instance, one of the common themes is people are just allowing themselves to get distracted. It's like the number of
mm,
times I've said to somebody when the wood is representing the current situation and I go, "Where do you want to get to?" And they go, "Out of the wood. I want to get the other side of the wood." So, well, why are we paying any attention to the trees then? Yeah? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
nonsense. But, 75% of the time I say that is, I've now learned to ask the question, where do you want to be? Well, I don't want to be in the wood. Well,
Is
let's get out of the wood then. So one person said that their turnover times 5 as a result of realizing they'd got stuck in the wood and they didn't want to be there.
Interesting. And I do like that idea there that you brought up, a lot the allowance of distraction that
Yeah.
exhibits good. And then I guess the other thing too is that sometimes when it's like, you know, making a big decision or feeling like you need to be something else, I think there can be those feelings of which I think that's why I asked about the fear of um, maybe success or the other side of it is because sometimes there's like this I'm gonna I'm gonna be dramatic and say like the decimation of your identity or your character. You have to be somebody new that you weren't before, and I think that sometimes there's an overwhelming quality to that.
Yeah. Let me just I'm going to disappear because there's a tool that I've developed, which I think is quite interesting because I did it. I'm using it in various different ways. When we have a decision to make, especially if it's something new, we act as each one of these is a decision we have to make. So each of these is a crossroads. The only reason I developed these was because I couldn't find a way of visually demonstrating that what we're trying to do is think we've got to make all of those, and I think there's about 35 of those decisions now. So we don't
Mhm.
do it because we're fearful about, oh, but I've got to know this, and this. Yeah, actually, by putting them all together, it's very difficult to understand what decision we're trying to make first. So it's going to be more difficult for those people who are listening to this auditorily. But I will give you a link to a blog that's got these on so at least people can understand what I'm talking about. But what I've got for those auditorily is lots of paper crossroads. So they're just pieces of paper cut into crossroads. And there's 30 of them all lumped on top of each other. But they don't just go one on top of each other, they link in. So sometimes if you're trying to pull one crossroads out, more of them come out. It's like I try to pull that one and more come out. So it's no wonder we get confused because we're putting all of, everything into all of this and then trying to say, well, of course I'm supposed to make sense of it. Well, no, you can't make sense of that.
Is that kind of like getting ahead of yourself or
Yes.
biting off more than you can chew, or
Yeah, but I think
is
so.
that,
And we also do it.
or is it a sequencing thing? Like you know, it's just like what's that one next tiny little step?
Yes, and that sort of links to intuition as well, is that people go, "Oh, I was intuited to do this." It's like, "Well, hang on a minute. What were you specifically intuited to do?" And I made a joke years ago about the fact that it's a bit like that I go to a party and I see a nice guy across the room and I go, "Oh my God," and I go over, and in my head, I'm 10 steps ahead. I'm on that first date, and then we're married, and it's just that no, intuition was, you just gotta go and say hello. You don't know why you're gonna say hello. You're only gonna find out why the intuition was to say hello once you've said hello, and then different crossroads may come into being. It's I mean,
Mhm.
it's like
I guess
I've made the decision that it's because we're attracted to each other and we're going to go out on a date, and it could be that that person knows somebody that would be able to help me with my book, or how do I
yeah,
know?
yeah, I can see that too because I mean I'm thinking personal. Maybe if I'm bringing too many expectations to a scenario, um, and I'm too fixed on the outcome, I'm missing some of those connection points because this person that I might talk to at a networking event or something isn't necessarily a direct connection
Right?
point. It might be an
Yeah.
indirect for a different path. Perfect. So I was kind of throwing out to the idea of expectations or getting too deep in a rigid or fixed path set, not realizing that there's some beautiful alternative route here that might have a better outcome. But if I'm bringing all those expectations to the scenario,
Yes, and I
it
mean,
gets
that goes back to actually taking the problem on a walk, because what happens is if you've got those expectations anyway, it's really hard to release those expectations because certainly if people have got minds like mine, my logical mind will defend its right to be right so vehemently, and yet how do we release our hold on what we think is the way to be going about a particular situation, which is where metaphor comes in because it sort of talks to a different part of us. So the logical brain is
Mhm.
quite happy because it's not really realizing that we're having a conversation. What I observe is that people go into a walk with me feeling one way, and they come out of it feeling differently, and then they go, "But where's the problem gone?" And it's like, well, because your brain has made sense of whatever you were grappling with, and it's
Mm,
opened the doors, and so, of course, you can see the solution that you couldn't see before we went for the walk, because
yeah,
logic has been on a coffee break, we've come back, and logic's gone, "Oh, I've got more information to work on. Great, thanks. And I now know what I need to do."
interesting. See, and I like that because there is a sense of, like, I mentioned the rigidity of that, because I know that there's times where that logical brain can come back and backfill reasoning
Yeah.
to just support something I'm already fixed on, even if that's not what's professing itself in the situation.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and you can get lost, and then all of a sudden, where I'm going to bring up the one thing that I brought up before is not having field awareness, because it might have been too fixed on some type of outcome that I was only focused on and missing my surroundings. And all of a sudden, now I'm found myself here and maybe not know how I got there or something.
Yeah,
It's just kind of plain.
let me just there's 2 things I want to mention there. So it's, 180 degrees and, higher vantage point. So there's, I've written a poem, and one of the stanzas is about getting to a higher vantage point, which I think is similar to your, peripheral vision, getting a bigger perspective. But what I realized because quite often what happens in my podcasts, I've not done one for a while, but need to get back to it. But in the videos that I do, is that I embody what we're saying. So it's like, oh, okay, I need to go to a higher vantage point. So let me go and find a higher vantage point. And behind the house here, there's a road that goes up the hill. And I thought, I mean, it's such a stunning view up the hill. And so I stopped and I started to record I've got to a higher vantage point, and I looked at the view and I went, "Oh, I haven't. I haven't got to a high enough vantage point, because actually what I am seeing here is exactly the same view as I've got from the house. It's just a bit higher." So that's why I love doing videos, because on my videos I go, "Oh my God, I didn't realize that." It's not me just sharing insight that I've had previously. It's the realization of that insight in that moment. And
Yeah.
another, okay, so let's just imagine that this landscape represents life, and you're going to tell me which aspect of the landscape in front of us, what element of it represents the problem. And the person turned round and said, "Well, it's not in front of me, it's behind me." And I just went, "Oh my," because actually, quite often I am, and in fact, it happened this afternoon where I said, "Oh," I sort of, my arms went, "Oh, in front of you," and the person went, "Oh, but it's behind, it's back there that the issue, it is the challenge." So
Hmm.
I think again, it comes back to the specificity, oh yeah, that long word, of our language about, if it's a higher vantage point, you need 360 degrees. So actually, they're easy words to run off our tongue, and they're idioms. So they sort of hide in plain sight in some respects. And then we think we've done it. We think we've got that, peripheral vision. We think we've got that higher vantage point. And a really great question is, am I high enough?
Mm, yeah. I also was thinking too, while you were saying that, as kind of the perspective and perception. I might have a preconceived perception. That is my perspective.
Well, that feels like a poem.
There probably is something in the perspective and perception. Because it essentially is, I think that there could be a similarity of sorts of a mindset there, but there really is a distinction between.
Yeah, because we believe one and we don't look at the
Yeah.
other well enough. We're believing in the current viewpoint. So we're going, this is real. And actually, in order to get insight about a situation, we actually need information that we're not aware of. So it's that unknown unknowns. It's the, what do I not know? What's hidden from view? What's round the corner? Because it's the information we don't know that's likely to actually open us to a new realization, rather than rearranging what we already know. Sorry, I have to write it down because
I love it.
I'll have forgotten it. Rearranging what we already know. Okay, cool. Oh, I feel poem coming on.
Nice. I love it. You'll have to strike while the iron's hot
Yeah.
after. Yeah. Well, I guess I think too is it's I'm stuck a little on the perception and perspective, and I'm not sure why, but I think there is something there. As an individual, we might have the way we perceive something, but then to have somebody else's or an
Nice.
external perception
Yeah, yeah.
back into it and looking at the same thing from a different perspective is a very powerful attribute, which is also what you're talking about too, is do I have a high enough vantage point or
Well,
am I able to
y
take myself.
yes, and interestingly, where my head's gone, because there's a poem I've written called "From Not Knowing to Knowing What to Do," and it talks about eyes and seeing and what we're not seeing. And so there's something about perception is one set of eyes, perspective is multiple eyes. So even if it's us doing it, we're still changing our perspective. So we're looking at it with new eyes, that sort of new seeing. Whereas perception perhaps is just the one set.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of the singularity
Yeah,
almost into the duality or the
yeah.
triad of being able to externalize that.
But
Well,
I've
I
gone
guess
for another metaphor.
I love it. No, this is awesome. I feel like there's a poetry that's happening where we continue to talk about this. So, um, and I guess too, some of this stuff is like you touched on it, but maybe you didn't say it exactly like this. But there's a sense of when you're working with somebody, there's a sense of maybe it's a stuckness, maybe it's a not getting. So I guess I'll just kind of plainly ask, do you have tips as far as the stuckness, or is it kind of that
um,
process
well,
when somebody's stuck, maybe how about the nature? They're stuck in the mud, or they're
well,
in a quicksand or something. I don't know.
the interesting thing is that acknowledging that you're not where you want to be is the first step. Because so
Yeah, sure.
often, if especially in a networking event where I'll say, "Oh, well, I help people who are stuck," and somebody goes, "Oh, I'm not stuck." So some of it is about, is there a gap between where you are and where you want to be? And then it's about exploring, so what word are you using for that? So it's really interesting that if there's a gap, then what's the reason for that gap? Why haven't you got there? And there are lots of traditional coaching tools that would help you identify your goal, come up with your action plan, look at your resources, um, to get you from A to suppose what I tend to do, because you're right, I do describe it as helping people get unstuck. But I do find that difficult because not everybody resonates with it.
Or yeah, or the recognition, but I guess it gets into the words
Yes,
again.
I just go back to idiom best describes how you're
Yeah,
feeling.
because you even nailed it though too. Even just the essence of like, I have this, but I
Yeah,
want this is different than this.
yeah.
And maybe stuck isn't the word, but there's a gap
Yeah.
between me getting over to
But the thing
this or
is
being.
but the thing is that even so we have a problem, decide, 'cause I'm struggling on YouTube because it's like, what is it a problem? Because people don't go, "I've got a problem." And yet that's what I'm helping people do. I'm helping people see situations from a different perspective, but they don't put that in as a search piece. But the interesting thing is that's different language we have about describing the current situation. And then it could be we've got another place that we want to be. But then there's a sort of a languaging around what we're looking for in order to how do we get from A to B. So, for instance, I had one client where they were looking for answers. Now, I don't know if it was this particular way round, but you'll get the gist. So, they were looking for answers and they could not find the answers. As
Mm,
soon as they started searching for solutions, they got 10 a penny. So I mean, if you think about the boardrooms in the world where they're all going, we haven't got an answer, and all you've got to do is everybody find a different word for answer, whether it's solutions, options,
yeah,
alternatives. And then you look at adding a verb. So am I finding it, searching for it, discovering it? And then you could add an adjective to it, I think, in terms of I'm looking for innovative ideas. I'm looking for effective ideas. I'm looking for efficient ideas. So, or, whether it's ideas, solutions, or whatever. So, and sometimes that's all that has to happen in order to find that answer, solution, and idea. So it's nothing
y-
about, we don't have to, I think what this conversation is helping me realize is we spend so much time talking because we think we've got to talk because we're stuck. And actually,
Yeah.
it's our languaging around that stuckness that's inaccurate that's keeping us stuck. It's a bit like um, a way, an anchor. It's like we're
Yeah.
using the word answer, and because answer in our mind has a particular qualities to it, and like a key, I suppose. It's like, well, no,
Sure.
what we're coming up with aren't answers. But are they solutions? Are they options? Are they alternatives? Oh, yeah.
Well, it's kind of like a spelling, it's a spell or it's a code or it's something. There's the wording is in there and stuff. And you know what's interesting too is we were talking, you said one word, but again, you get into the words and the specificity. So I think sometimes we are running towards something or we're running
Ooh,
away from just like, I'll take anything. I just don't want that.
they
So now I start creating actions because I just don't want that, which is different than me going towards that. And so I think when I want for answers, sometimes I'm really just want the answers to like how not to be.
nice. Yeah, lovely.
And when I'm going towards this, I have a different approach. But these are just, again, I really agree with you because I think sometimes people get hung up on the words or the coding of, a sequence of words that means something.
Yeah, I've got a paths and destinations poem. One of the standards I mentioned earlier was about the vantage point. But very early on, it says sometimes we know where we are, where we want to be, and we just got to get from there to there. And sometimes we just know where we don't want to be. And therefore, it's
Mm,
just about walking to the next crossroads and only making a decision when we get to that crossroads. So it's, I'm leaving where I am, and then I'll know where I'm going, but only at the crossroads. But oh, I don't like not knowing where I'm going, it would seem. So
mm,
I left the car park and I said, I am going to the next crossroads and I will make a decision when I get to that crossroads. And you can hear me on the podcast. I mean, it's not a big wood, so it can only have been a matter of minutes. But for those minutes, I was going, I want to turn around. I don't like this. I don't like, I mean, logically, my
interesting.
brain is going, Alison, the crossroads is only a few minutes away. But literally, I could feel it in my body. Every ounce of my body was going, "Let's go back to the car park. Let's go back to the car park."
Interesting.
And so it was like, I know I don't wanna be at the in that instance, the car park was representing where I didn't wanna be. But actually, I was preferring to go back to where I said I didn't wanna be in this enactment than move along a route because I didn't know where the route would end.
Oh, interesting. There's sometimes too with that is there's the deep levels of survival that we bring into these decisions. And you touched on that too, that is there a cliff off the other side? And whether it's real or imagined, there's times where it feels really like a life and death situation. Maybe we don't even understand, but it just feels like so big. it's there's such a root chakra type
Yeah.
of survival aspect to it.
Well, we think there is, and then when you unpick it, it's perhaps not.
Yeah.
But actually we associate the feelings with the situation and believe those feelings are absolutely accurate about that situation, when if we can unpick it, then it's, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'm seeing the situation very rigidly, and of course it's not life or death." I'm not saying that there aren't times when it is, but
No, no,
yeah,
absolutely. But that's why I say even too real or
yeah, yeah,
imagined. Many times it's imagined and it just feels real.
yeah.
I'd like to run another one by you too, because I like that you integrate nature in there. And it was just something that popped in my head. It was a stat I read about, I think it's honeybees, if I'm not
Oh,
mistaken.
cool.
So maybe I'll get in trouble but it's of the hive, it's on average, it's like 15.3% of the hive is they're it's kind of programmed into the DNA or the essence of the hive to explore so that they don't over pollinate or they don't over farm the pollen or whatever that is. I'm using the wrong terms
Whatever.
because I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know honey, but maybe over harvest the surroundings and stuff. But it's actually built into nature for us to have an aspect of us to explore, which is about 1/6. Um, so I'm not sure that there's a question here as much as I think that nature has a beautiful way, which is what you started with this conversation with, of showing those lessons. But there is an aspect of what you also brought in was that exploration of I don't know where I'm going to go, but I have enough. And you didn't say this, so
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
fill in a
yeah, yeah.
couple words. Like I have enough faith that I know something's going to be extraordinary or something's going to be better or something if I just make that next choice, but there's an exploration
Good.
built within nature, built within the framework of it
I
too.
feel as if I keep saying I've written a poem, but I have. I've written a poem on Rewild Your Life, and it sort of says that we've domesticated our lives. So it's exactly what you're saying.
Sure.
It's we've straightened our rivers internally. It's like in our own lives. We've
Oh, wow,
You see what I mean? We've
yes.
straightened our rivers, and therefore, is it any wonder that we're more overwhelmed and stressed? Rewilding here in the UK certainly is about
Yeah.
putting the bends back in the rivers. It's about putting trees back on the hills because actually we don't have as many trees on our mountains as you do over in the States. Um, and then we've put houses on floodplains. So if you look at what we've done from a nature perspective, is we've stopped the things that stop the water flowing up in the mountains. We've sped up the speed of the water when they're in the river, and we've not even given the river anywhere to go when it gets to the floodplains because we've now got houses. And that's exactly what we've done with our lives. We've over domesticated our lives such that our emotions do that. It's like we can't cope with emotions. We can't cope with everything that's coming at us because we don't have, whatever it is, we don't have trees on our mountains, our own metaphorical mountains. We've
Mhm.
made everything, oh, the quickest, easiest way to do everything. Well, no, perhaps it was slow to give us time to think.
God, that's beautiful. Like, you started out with "We straightened our rivers." That's really powerful. Like, I hope somebody else hearing this, that was a huge impact when you said that, because there's the internal rivers that we've straightened. I think that's an immense lesson there, and that is so true. That one really hit me. But then too, into the overclassification, or if I feel this, what is it called? Somehow I have to catalog it, categorize it, weigh it, measure it somehow, and I think that we programmed our minds to do that instead of feeling our way through it. Sometimes we're angry, sometimes we're sad, sometimes we have to allow these emotions instead of just over
Well,
cataloging it
because
too.
we can't, because we haven't been taught. I mean, I think kids these days, certainly here in the UK, are being, they're being told to count to 10 and, articulate how they're feeling.
No, that's okay. Well, I was kind of talking about over classification, weight. Everything has to be weighed, measured, and um, you know, give a definition to stuff
Yeah,
like
it's
that. I
just,
mean,
yeah, I don't know. We're just speeding everything up.
sure,
And I suppose when I first started work, I didn't have a computer. I'm that old. I can remember sending faxes. Some people may not even have heard of those, but it's like you go to the other side of the factory with a piece of paper, and the piece of paper goes into the machine, and the machine then facsimiles it over to the other side of the world, and it turns up at the other side of the world. But there were like 4 days between me sending that fax with a little bit of information about, "Can you send us a quote for this?" And it would be 4 days till we got an answer, whereas now you're sending an email and you're expecting an answer immediately. Though we've straightened the rivers, we're not giving our brains time to assimilate all of this because it's gotta be quicker, quicker, quicker.
that's it. Yeah, that's actually, and then interesting enough too. Because of the acceleration, there's such a compound. There's so many things we're not assimilating. It either gets swept away or gets stuck or in our processes. Interesting. That's a really, yeah, I really like that way of looking at it. It's just a fascinating way. But I do agree that the processing has, there's a call to have it immediate, a sense of immediate fulfillment, and an expectation with that too.
Well,
At
yeah,
this
I mean,
point.
and if you look at all the conversations at the moment about, you know, here in the UK, some they're talking about, I think it's Germany, is it, where or France, where people are not able to send emails out of their normal working hours, or managers aren't able, to send
Yeah.
their team.
Yeah, I thought it was France, if
Yeah.
I'm mistaken.
And the UK were gonna go down that route, and now there's some discussion about whether it will be or won't be. And then we've got the whole conversation about working from home, not working from home. COVID, I think, did take us so far one way, obviously, and I think there'll be some happy medium. But so it's all those sorts of conversations about, during COVID, everybody went, "Oh my god, I've got better life balance."
Yeah.
And then it's like we're hanging on to that, I think, is my belief. Um, and yeah, organisations are losing because we got loads of creativity from bumping into people when we were in the office. So, I don't know what the answer is there, but I think it's just that whole.
Some of it's just an observation
Yes,
and
yes, true. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, there isn't an answer, it's just that whole, wow, I can remember, doing some time management cropped up on a workshop I was doing, and so we used metaphor for time management and this, that, and the other, and somebody said, "But if my boss sends me an email, I expect that he needs an answer immediately," and I said, "But have you had that conversation with him?" Because I would like to think that most managers don't expect it, or would come up with okay, if it's urgent, I'm going to write it on, or I'm going to use, we've got so many, Slack things and WhatsApps. And so it's like, okay. So it's a bit like with my mother. I go, you know what? Well, I've got a landline and she can ring me on the landline. But I say, and because of the, how we relate and extra, it's like, if it's urgent on my mobile, because my mobile will let you, access, but I'm not going to suddenly speak to my mother when I'm wandering around or if I'm in a meeting. So I think it's those sorts of conversations we need to have as teams that say, how do we communicate urgently? Because there will be things that are urgent. But if I send you an email at a certain time, I don't necessarily expect, because we were talking about time management and somebody said, well, I have to answer every email as it comes in. I went, well, that doesn't make it makes sense to look at your emails 2 or 3 times a day, not
Yeah.
every 5 minutes.
Because then you're being reactionary versus
Well, and
proactive and
our ability to swap, there's lots of research, not that I can quote it, but there's lots of research about our inability to be able to go back to the task we were in and how long it takes us. So we think, oh, I'm just checking my emails. No, you've stopped your brain thinking about what you were on. You've gone and looked at that. And now you're trying to come back to this work. Focused attention on something, we've just lost the art of it. Things
yeah.
happen quicker, we make better decisions if we're focused, but we do have to get back. See, I don't have, and sometimes I wish I did, but most of the time not. I do not have my emails on my phone, and I don't have any notifications. I mean, the only way I'll know if I've had an email is if I go and look at my emails. I don't have something crop up. And even on my phone, I have most of the text messagey things turned off. So it's like I'll see a little number appear if I look at my phone. But
Yeah.
and okay, if I'm traveling, I'll have my iPad. Emails are on my iPad. So I can go and look at emails should I need to. But
Sure.
ordinarily, when I was walking around for a walk earlier, nobody could contact me other than, by mobile.
There was always a 24-hour, kind of professional reply window too. You kind of have 24-hour professional business day or whatever that is, to respond. But yeah, no, there is a sense of immediate, and some of it I would imagine too is just like get it off my plate. Some of it's like just being too reactionary, not being intentional with your day. And then there are those people in those situations, because we're kind of talking about work situations where they just kind of come and just disrupt the environment and create wakes and waves, and so they draw people's attention to it.
Well, and interestingly, see, this is my. You've just mentioned waves, and it's that whole. Well, actually, if we wanted to do something, we'd go into the harbour to not be affected by those waves. So,
Yeah.
actually, if those emails feel like a constant tirade of waves coming at you, it's okay. So, what do? We can either put like a, like one of those wave machines that picks up electricity.
Mhm.
Yeah, you could put that all around you and it will absorb the waves. Or we could get a better boat, a bigger boat, can't we? Because that bigger
Yeah.
boats can cope better with the waves, or we can go into harbour.
Yeah. I love it. So using kind of the nature metaphor and stuff like that, I guess I won't lead it too heavy, but I guess if you're standing on a precipice or something for yourself, what's the next big horizon or in your path?
Um, well, I've got an idea for a book. Well, I've got a couple of poetry books. I've got a fiction book and a board game.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. The
Does it have is it with some of the things you're working on, like the board
Yeah,
game?
it was really funny because it is a self-development tool, or it's a problem-solving tool board game, so it's not a game particularly.
Is it more of an
Mm.
exercise then or
Yeah,
uh
a board, and there will be playing pieces, and it's sort of early development currently, but um, yeah, it was just really interesting that I've tried it out only in it's a board game that you can play on your own, so from 1 to however many players. And I tried it, bearing in mind the book I've written is Can't See the Wood for the Trees, and I've tried it with a few people, and I was describing it to some of my, PA and said, "Look, they're getting such clarity about what to do. They're starting overwhelmed. You're not sure what to do, and they're getting clarity about what to do next." And she said, "Oh, you mean they can see the wood for the trees?" And I just thought, "Oh yeah, of course." Because going back to that stuck bit,
Sure.
the yeah, that's what I help people see the wood for the trees. To know what to do. So that's what the board game's about. And then the fiction book that I'm writing is the wood that couldn't see itself for the trees. So I am really, really, really using that idiom a lot.
Oh, I love it. Now seeing you said the wood that can't see itself,
Yeah.
is that kind of a perspective or a perception thing too?
Well,
Would that fall into that? We won't
it's more about okay, so there's a functioning wood. So you've got your sycamores and your oaks and your ashes and whatever, and it's functioning and it's a community that's working well. And then center
Sure.
of the community dies,
Okay.
and over time the different fractions all separate. So you end up with the sycamores not talking to the oaks, not talking to the ash.
Oh, cool.
And then obviously, hopefully, the end of the book will be a functioning wood again. So it's the wood that's lost its sense of self and therefore they become the trees. It's like, well, we're sycamore, we're not a wood.
I
So
love that
obviously,
because it's kind of that symbiotic
yeah.
relationship where they kinda disconnection and they cut
So you
themselves
could
off.
argue that, as we're recording this, that book is getting more and more, you know, as a metaphor for what's happening out there, really, in terms of
Sure.
everybody. We're not a wood, we're not a planet, because if you chunk it
Yeah.
up, it's we're all we're all the planet, we're all Earth, and it's yeah,
Mhm.
there's interconnected, and yet sometimes we just act as if that's not the case. That our little bit of the planet is going to be okay, and
Right. Absolutely. So here's if anybody wants to work with you, reach out, what's the best way to kinda,
Well,
get a hold of you?
alisonsmith.co is the website, but to be fair, Alison
Okay.
Smith, people might go, "Oh." So Landscaping Your Life will find me because it's Landscaping Your Life with Alison Smith on YouTube. Landscaping Your Life with Alison Smith is the podcast, although as I say, I've not done one for a while. So and Landscaping Your Life as a hashtag is on Instagram, TikTok, various, and even Landscaping Your Life on LinkedIn. So yeah, landscaping your life because nobody else uses landscaping your life. There's loads of Alison Smithies, but landscaping your life, not so much. So even the book, even if you went on to buy a book, if you did landscaping your life, you'd actually find the book quicker than saying can't see the wood for the trees.
Nice. I love it. So thank you so much for joining. This has been a pleasure. It's a lot of fun.
Well, thank you for having me.